In 1969, you either bought Sugar Sugar by the Archies or King Crimson's first LP. There was no middle ground. It was pure us and them. Pop v counterculture, top 40 sheep against those who knew better. And for those of us who chose the court of the Crimson King, the scene was thrillingly secret, willfully exclusive and maddeningly important. On TV, nobody understood it, nobody talked about it, nobody looked like it, no one campaigned for us, and no commercials tried to ape our moods. It was wonderful. Underground heaven. An era when rock music lived beneath television's floorboards. Dark, musty, and mysterious. The Old Grey Whistle Test's 16-year run began in 1971, but it ceased to be truly useful after about a third of its life. Its host during that time was Whispering Bob Harris.
Hello and welcome to this week's Whistle Test.
The man who never sold out. That's chiefly because nobody ever asked him to sell anything.
Norman Nosebait on drums, Nick Hutchinson on bass, and our chum Pete Wingfield on keyboards. Fires of Spring was the title of that, and you can find it on the LP Whatever Happened to Benny Santini.
See, Bob knew he was one of us, but he worked for the BBC. That's definitely them. So he created an atmosphere of secrecy and separateness.
And our visitor to the programme tonight is also currently touring the country. And when I tell you that among the hit records he's had here are Peter Gunn, Because They're Young, Dance with the Guitar Man and Rebel Rouser, you'll know for sure that I'm talking of Duane Eddy.
You can't hardly miss it.
It was just, you know, sort of drunken night at the Whiskey A Go-Go in Los Angeles. I mean, only one. I didn't do it every night. Sundays off. Because they're closed.
Yeah.
Of course, you know all about that, Bob.
Yes.
Man about town,
sure.
cosmopolitan raver.
Absolutely, yeah.
You were wonderful, Bob.
Oh, thank you. They will have their jokes, these people.
This ridiculously unassuming style was in fact the key to his strength. See, rock stars are, in the main, mumbling, bumbling, timid pinheads, so overwhelmed by their gift that their lack of personality is often interpreted as inscrutable hip. Bob Harris's weekly surrender of his own self put them at ease. His softly, softly style made Attenborough and those gorillas look like a firework display.
Because Hard Nosed Highway really seems to me to be a very complex album in terms... Lyrically, it's more complex, I think, maybe than some of the other things before. How much time did you spend on this new album, Ben? What about the new album, Billy? How long were you working on that LP? How long did it take, though, to record that album?
Let's see.
Also, rock people don't know lots of things, so Bob told them.
What is that thing that on the bottom that's reflecting back up on the camera?
Well, that's a thing that goes around and it allows me to read, actually, what I'm going to say.
Camera, lights, microphone.
Okay, sorry.
Yet despite all Bob's psychological masterstrokes, dressed down, no big gestures, voice like a vibrator in 6 feet of sand, quite often the intended quarry would catch a strange establishment scent and simply fail to show up, leaving Bob with beard all over his face.
Hello again and welcome to Whistle Test. And the first thing to say is that Joe Walsh can't be with us today after all.
We were hoping to be able to welcome Sean Phillips live on the programme tonight, but due to permit problems, he's not able to come into the studio.
John Prine cancelled his British tour very much at the last moment too, so obviously he won't be appearing on the programme tonight. John Prine can't be with us this week. Hopefully he will be along next Tuesday. Billy Joel, as you've probably seen, was advertised in Radio Times, but as with John Prine last week, he's unable to be with us. Sadly, there's no film of the Rolling Stones on the programme tonight, or Van Morrison, in fact. Permit problems have led to the cancellation of his appearance on the programme, and there's no one more disappointed than me.
Week in, week out, some schlumped-out old head would leave Harris's running order in tatters. And you began to detect, if not a cynicism, then certainly some curdled caution.
Next week, music from Jim Capaldi and Blood, Sweat and Tears, although after the unfortunate death of the band's saxophonist in Amsterdam last night, there must be some doubt about their appearance next week.
Then, a couple of years in, one excitable go-getter on the production team came up with the following revolutionary thought. He said, listen, man, if they're like these bands, if they won't come over from the States for us, you know what? Why don't we kind of, you know, kind of go over there?
And I was born in the back. How you doing? We're on Interstate number 16.
America relaxed Bob to an incredible degree. His interviewing technique, though rarely Paxman-esque, unravelled totally. He was a fan, just hanging out, ready to talk to anyone.
What are we going to expect when we get there now?
I don't know. I ain't never been there before.
It's an interesting contrast, it seems to me, moving from one end of the scale, in a sense, to another, from hot chocolate to Bearsville. How did that come about?
Well, I've known Albert for quite a long time, and...
No, I don't. About 2 o'clock, I
20
think.
to 4.
Oh, 20 to 4. No sense of time.
20 to 4.
You know, that may have been the problem. For Bob Harris and us soldiers of the progressive underground, 20 to 4 was a time that happened to other people. Afternoons. Ha! Our world met around midnight, in an era when midnight was the furthest outpost on the TV schedule. We were the only people still up, and our relationship was clandestine and subversive.
Great stuff. What a nice way to start the programme. Music from Druid. Music from the new Stackridge album, Extravaganza, and that was No One's More Important Than the Earthworm. How true that is.
And then, punk rock. For Bob and Whistle Test, the gig was over. The roof was torn off and daylight came flooding in. And this sort of hybrid was never going to work.
I've been playing it on the wireless myself since the day I first heard it, and it comes from their new album, Plastic Letters. Is that Deborah Harry delicious?
Shame. Nobody was more embroiled in punk than myself, and yet now I think we made a mistake. In insisting music was no big deal and anything goes, pop was demystified. And once something's been demystified, what are you left with? After the short-term thrill, pop music and culture is now spread so thin as to be virtually meaningless. Nothing really matters. Oh, fun, of course, but desperately cynical and dourly postmodern. You know, it's not cool to say this, but for the first time, we could be a generation who are hipper than our kids. How awful.
Well, we're sitting in the Whistle Test studios, surrounded by the band's gear and Roy's gear. Sadly, this afternoon, really basically unused because Roy Buchanan and the band are suffering from an English ailment. I think Roy is probably the best description.
Yeah, I think so.
How are you feeling now?
I'm a little weak. I got the thing must be the flu. Feels like it.
Good night.